So today we're going to be talking about dogs and the meaning of life. And what can dogs really teach you about life? Well, more than you might think. First of all, I love this quote. This is actually hanging at the Animal Harbor Animal Shelter. The greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated, and that's Mahatma Gandhi. I happen to agree with that a great deal. And then, of course, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part is the seventh Unitarian Universalist principle. So you can plug in any pet animal to this discussion. It doesn't have to be dogs. It can be cats or whatever other animal you keep as pets. And I've seen people who have grown incredibly affectionate to, for instance, turtles. One of my seminary classmates has 2 turtles that she had for a long, long time because they have a very long lifespan. And she swore that these turtles were just as affectionate as any dog or cat. And it's pretty amazing. I had a friend who had a pet rat and ferrets, and on it goes. We can form bonds with animals. My particular bond is with dogs, and that's the story today. This is my disclaimer. That is a real dog, by the way, that one on the left. It's not one of those little stuffed animals designed. That's real. That dog lives at my house. All the dogs in this presentation have lived in Traversa home. There are no stunt doubles, no photoshopping. These are real, honest-to-goodness photos. The only photoshopping at all, sometimes I remove that little red flare from their eyes. So we'll begin with fostering dogs, a cautionary tale. This is the life that we have led. Fostering begins innocently enough. This is a photo taken back in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, the gray dog, the white dog, and the red dog are our first 3 dogs that we had as a family. The gray one was Violet, and we got her shortly after we joined the Air Force. And we had 2 children at the time. We'd always wanted a pet and couldn't afford one. When I finally joined the Air Force, that was one of the first things we did, was go down to the animal shelter and get Violet. And for many, many years, she was an only dog and swore she was just another one of the kids and acted just like it. And she was a wonderful dog. And then next to her, the white dog is Zeus, was a poodle. He was the first dog that we got once we got to North Carolina and descended into the madness that you will soon hear about fostering dogs. And Shotzi, the red dog, we still have today. You know her as the nasty red dog if you come to my house and barks and snarls. She's pretty old now and grumpy. But the dog on the very left, the black one, is Suanna. She is our very first foster dog. This picture is so old, it's before digital photographs, at least in our home. So this is actually a scanned photo. See, where we got Zeus was the Cabarrus County Humane Society in North Carolina. And we became friends with a lady there who would keep some of the smaller dogs in her garage so they weren't stressed out being with the big dogs. And we would go out there and walk dogs for her. And my daughter actually started at first as a school project. And then as we're out there walking, one day she says, you know, I've got this little dog, Suanna. She just had a litter. We're weaning the pups off her. We want to keep them separated. Would you like to have her come and live with you for a little bit, just so she can be away from the pups? And I'd never even heard of fostering dogs before, just temporarily taking them into your home until they get adopted. And we said, sure, and Suanna fit in great. She was a wonderful little dog and fitting perfectly with our 3 dogs. And then we found out that we could do this on a regular basis. We could take dogs home and foster them till they got homes because they did not have enough space for all the dogs that were coming in. And as we did this and started bringing dogs into our home, over time we learned that not all dogs that came in were happy and healthy like Suanna. Sometimes they were abused. This is Wiley. We named him Wiley because he looked like Wile E. Coyote after being held out one too many times. Most of the rest of the dogs you see here, in fact, all the rest of the dogs will be dogs we fostered or took care of here in Tullahoma. So Wiley and his friend, Meg, both came to us at the same time. They suspected they came out of a puppy mill. Puppy mills are like mass production factories for puppies that go into pet stores. We'll talk a little bit more about them later. This is what he looked like when we got him. Just terrible. They had cut some of the hair off because it was so matted. They did the best they could just to get all the garbage off of him. So this is the before photo. This is what Wiley was supposed to have looked like. You can see a dramatic difference if you simply care for a dog. So this is a dog that's hated and left to run and dumped. And this is what he looks like a few years later when his hair grew back out. He never got over his fear. He was always afraid. And some of the dogs we deal with have this problem. They've been abused and they just have a fear that goes off the scale. This is Precious. She was a dog that was rescued by the Tullahoma Animal Shelter from an abusive situation. You can't tell it necessarily from this photo, but her left ear is missing. It had been chewed off by another dog, as best we could tell. Those legs are solid mats. They're not huge legs. That is mud and feces and grime into an almost cement-like consistency. And there's a close-up. You can see this whole clump right here, that's just garbage that's coagulated and formed onto her poor leg. So that was Precious when they picked her up. That's Precious shaved down to get all of the garbage off of her. And Precious was adopted by a home and as far as we know had a really good life and was loved, but she wasn't loved up until that point. And it's hard to imagine how you can let a dog get this bad. There has to be some kind of a darkness in your soul that lets you do that to an animal. But she was okay, and this is, you're going to see this photo a few times. This is one of our rooms. The orange wall will indicate there's a big bed we could let dogs get up on and be up there with us. This used to be my office, and I'd let them come up and sit with me while I was working. But something else we learned from Precious was she had ear mites, and that wasn't something they were really checking for when they were sending these dogs home to be fostered, because she came and lived with us for a while. Ear mites are highly contagious. If dogs play together, they easily go from one to the other. So if you ever foster a dog, if you ever bring a stray dog into your home, you have to make sure that dog is vetted and quarantined or separated for at least a week, if not two, to make sure you're not bringing in some disease or ear mites or something else. I had to have all my dogs treated for ear mites because we were still ignorant of some of these things and didn't realize. So now that's one of the things we always look for. Total vetting, check for ear mites, make sure they're vaccinated, and make sure they've been quarantined for a while. This is Sasha. This is a poodle that lived with us. Sweetest dog, just adorable. That's her lying on my lap on the left. Just affectionate beyond words. This is Sasha with a gigantic hernia. This whole thing right here is essentially her intestines bulging out. She came from a puppy mill where the only thing they cared about was could you breed the dog, could they have litters. No medical care is given to these dogs. They are treated as cogs in a machine to produce puppies, to sell to dog brokers, to sell to pet stores. Never, ever, ever, ever buy a dog from a pet store. The source of those dogs is 99% of the time horrific conditions of puppy mills where these puppies are produced. And Sasha was an example, a wonderful, sweet dog that didn't get even the most basic medical care. We got the hernia fixed when she got spayed, and she was fine, went to a great home. And another example of people simply abusing animals for monetary gain. This is Ranger. If you have been here long time, you remember I did a talk where I brought Ranger into the church. The talk was about the evil of humans, how they are capable of great evil. I used Ranger as an example because this is the most terrified dog we've ever had. This is Ranger sitting on the same bed Precious was sitting on a little bit ago that I showed you, pinning himself into the corner out of sheer terror. I don't know what they did to him, but when we would put him into our backyard, which was fenced so he could run free, if we called him into the house, he wouldn't come, so I'd have to go out and try to sort of herd him into the door. And when he ran into the house, he went charging into the dog kennel to hide so fast that the thing would move. He'd just crash into it and the thing would jump as he jumped into it. And then I'd just lock him in there because he was so afraid. How does a dog get to this point? That's not the natural inclination of these animals. The natural inclination is to be loving and friendly. Somebody did something horrible to him, I'm assuming. Oscar is a very cute little terrier who was blind, who was dumped into a dumpster in Tullahoma and was found in the garbage. We named him Oscar with our warped, twisted sense of humor. Oscar from Sesame Street. That's Oscar and Steve on the couch. They were very close friends. Oscar wasn't with us very long. He got adopted very quickly. Oscar was blind. Steve actually had brain damage. One of his eyes was missing. He would go around in circles, just run in circles for no apparent reason. Not all the time, but he definitely had brain damage. And so we now learn about birth defects because of bad breeding. Because these breeders in the puppy mills will breed sons to mothers. They don't crossbreed as much as they should. They will do anything to pop these puppies out, because once they sell them, it doesn't matter. It's never going to come back to them. And so they actually will do horrible inbreeding and produce dogs with all sorts of birth defects. For instance, Pip and Xander both came out of puppy mills. Pip was another dog with horrible fear issues. When we first got Pip, he had never stepped in grass. We put him in grass and he was paralyzed. If a leaf blew across the yard, he would freeze in terror. It took us probably 6 years to get Pip just to come on command and go outside without us having to go and pick him up and take him out and put him in the yard. For 6 years we had to do that. Xander, on the other hand, came out of a puppy mill. He was also born blind. Sweet little dog, born blind. This is Ted. He's one of the dogs we have now. He always has his little tennis ball, so I'll play fetch with him. Ted looks great, except he's the one who almost died from a simple vaccination. He has a horrible allergic reaction to one of the vaccinations, and if it hadn't been for Dr. Windley's recognizing what was going on and giving him the appropriate antihistamines, he would have died from anaphylactic shock. It scared the willies out of me, and even after he gave him the shot, he said he may not make it, and fortunately he did. Dharma's his sister. She has a terrible skin condition. This picture actually is better than she looks now. A lot of her fur is fallen out, and in the winter she wears a little knitted coat that Jancy made her because she doesn't have a lot of fur on her. She should look just like Ted. She doesn't. When she was young, she did. And now she has huge patches of bare skin. Again, both of them came from a dog that came out of a puppy mill that we were able to foster. This is Buffy, another dog from a irreputable breeder. She was born this way with one eye. And that's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, by the way, just in case you're wondering. When I went to Afghanistan, my oldest son Taylor took care of Buffy and another dog we had, Rommel, and his buddy decided it would be funny to make this picture and send it to me via email. So there's Pirate Buffy, and Rommel was missing a leg, so there's a little peg leg drawn in there for him. And this is Pirates of the Taylor Bean. Which brings us to injured dogs. We get a lot of those too. Rommel was hit by a car, his right leg. They tried through some experimental surgeries to save it because it was broken in a very bad place. And the vet did it for free because he wanted to experiment with new techniques he hadn't used before, and none of them worked. And eventually they just amputated it, and we went around that vet and just said, forget it, this is enough of this. He carried this poor, bandaged up leg for several months while we were taking care of him. We finally said enough of this and got it amputated. And he lives with my parents today, and he's still healthy and doing well, and the three legs have never bothered him. This is Faye. You may remember I gave you a sermon a while back about would I trade eternal life for a little dog named Faye suffering in my place for all eternity. This is her, the dog so ugly you have to love her. She came to us with a broken leg from the Tullahoma Animal Shelter, and we fostered her and immediately said don't adopt her out to anyone, we get first shot. And she's a doll, and her leg healed up fine, unlike Rommel, so she's perfectly normal. And interestingly, they both live with my parents now, the two dogs that had broken legs in our home. And they get along great. And my dad, who swore he'd never have any animals after the last cat they had died, has now had 4 of our dogs, and he adores them even if he won't admit it on some occasions. So, a lot of our dogs are saved from puppy mills. All of these dogs and many more escaped the life of being trapped in essentially rabbit cages, not even touching grass in many cases, and living their entire lives in cramped quarters, used for nothing more than the mass production of puppies to sell to puppy brokers. And there are dog brokers who buy from puppy mills and in turn sell them to pet shops. That's the nastiness. I'm not going to show you the pictures. I wanted this to be a more uplifting and happy talk today, so we're not going to talk about it too much other than to say puppy mills are horrible, horrible, horrible places, and encourage anyone you know never to get a dog from a puppy mill. Or from a pet store, because they come from puppy mills. So this is what happens when you get into the fostering. You start having a bunch of dogs in your house. That picture I showed you at the very beginning with all the dogs on the couch, there were 13 dogs in that photo. We used to have a little game going in the rescue community. Someone would send a picture and say, hey, look, I managed to get 6 dogs to hold still on the couch, and then 7 and 8. I finally said, well, we have 13, let's see what we can do. So I got my kids and Jancy, and we got all the dogs on the couch, and then they'd either duck down behind the couch or jump off to the sides, and I'd snap the picture, and we finally got one with all 13, more or less, most of them looking at the camera. 13's probably the most we've ever had. We don't normally have that many, not by a long shot. But when you have dogs running the house, sometimes common occurrences in life become a little more difficult. For instance, playing cards. Because I'm pretty sure that Dharma there was giving clues to the other opponents. Or Doug trying to write his sermon. Oh, Dad, you really don't want to do that right now. No, you're right, I really don't. Well, play with me. Or perhaps trying to read a book, and Ted says, come on, it's time to play fetch. These are not posed shots, by the way. This is my life. Push the dog out of the way, I'm reading now. And this was not posed either. This is Steve, the one I said had brain damage. I was working on something on the floor, and that crazy dog literally climbed up my leg and onto my back and sat there. And I said, Jancy, go get the camera. No one will believe this. So I swear on my mother's grave, when she has one, that this is not a posed shot. And then I've also told the story that after I came back from Afghanistan and was really angry at Americans and angry at the situation and just feeling down and despondent and didn't feel like doing anything, there were 2 things that helped me to snap out of that. One of them was this church and being involved here, and the other one, I've told the tale of 5 puppies that were found without their mother and how we had to nurse them. Well, now you're going to get to see them. These 5 puppies were allegedly Pomeranians, at least that's how it was claimed when they called me up on the phone, and they said the mother's missing, they're 4 weeks old, they need to be bottle fed. And I said, sure, I'll do that. And when you have to take care of 5 puppies and feed them all with a bottle every morning before you go to work, and in the middle of the day and in the evening, you don't really have a whole lot of time to be worrying about what kind of a funk you're in. You're trying to keep these puppies going. And it worked. They all drank out of the bottle, and they all grew up to be healthy pups. And there they are romping in the yard. That blue case there, I had them inside. I would load the 5 puppies into that big Tupperware container and take them outside and just tip it onto the side, and they'd all run out and do their thing. So we had a good routine going. But let the adopter beware. This is a good lesson for you too. If you see a cute little fuzzy puppy, don't assume it's always going to stay a cute little fuzzy puppy. So this is one of those 5 puppies. This was Bosley as a puppy, as a Pomeranian. So tiny, so cute. What could ever happen? Well, this is Bosley getting bigger. This isn't Bosley grown up. This is just Bosley getting bigger. That's Bosley grown up. He turned out to be, and he's a great dog, believe me, but he wasn't a Pomeranian. He was at least 40 pounds, if not more. He was a big boy, and all of his brothers were too. So how many dogs have been in our lives? We've talked about fostering dogs, and people say, oh, you take care of dogs, but they don't fully realize, and I don't think we fully realize the extent of it. And I had a great time hunting through all my records, because I took pictures of all the dogs because I had to put them on adoption sites, on websites. So I have a pretty good photo history. So here's a quick look at all the dogs I have digital photos for. This, and there were plenty more before that. Oh, Stewie, Dee Dee, and Birdie. Oh, went the wrong way. This is Abby. She had 3 puppies. She was a Shih Tzu, and you can see one of her pups is being chased by Jack, our poodle. And then that's Buffy there too. So the 3 pups running around were Max, Fiona, and Randall. There's Charlotte, Fiona and Gabriel, Gigi and Grendel, Griffin and Jake, and Kojak, who had mange and was bald, thus the name Kojak. He turned out to be a beautiful dog too, but that picture, he looked pretty rough. Grace and Paco. Paco was another one of those dogs that was terrified of everything. Only Jancy and I could pick him up and hold him. I finally found a woman who was kind enough, who knew coming in, this would be a long-term project, who was willing to come in and just sit on the couch for about a half hour with treats until he'd actually come close. She finally did adopt him. We figured he'd never get adopted. But it also shows that there's people out there for all these dogs. Dogs you think will never get adopted. If you're patient, someone shows up. For instance, Pedro was an old, nasty, grumpy Chihuahua, overweight with bad fur and bare skin, and no teeth. And we figured no one's ever going to adopt him. After a year and a half, a kindly woman who lived by herself wanted this little guy, and he ended up being pushed around in a stroller and taken for walks, and she adored him, and he lived another year and a half. He was very old when we got him, and she just gave him a great end of life. And then there's Missy, Sassy, Rocky, and Bullet. There's Bree, who had Ted and Dharma, our 2 Poms, and Fritz. And there's Ted, Dharma, and Fritz as little puppies. And then we have Bree, Yum Yum, and Coco. That's your Gilbert and Sullivan reference, Yum Yum and Coco. Molly, Mindy, Megan, Wiley, who both were adopted by my parents. That's Wiley, the one who I showed you earlier that looked so horrible. Here are the pups that I showed you. Sosuke, Diablo, Bear, Dieter. Star and Angel, Karma and her pups, another Pomeranian from a puppy mill. Darwin, Zane, Freya, Buster, Sasha and Ping, Serenity. There's your, we have some sci-fi names too. Ozzy, Xander from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Steve. Zoe, getting the trend here. BG Ranger Tiny, and a puppy we had for one day from Tullahoma Animal Shelter, and neither of us can even remember his name. He spent one night with us and got adopted. He was cute though. Lily, Candy, Rue, Marasa. So that's a sample of the dogs that have come and gone through the Traversa household and been adopted out. If you haven't heard the phrase fur kids, we hadn't either until one day we were talking to someone in the rescue group, and they asked us, so how many fur kids, how many skin kids? What? So skin kids are your human children and fur kids are your dogs. So these are ours, because people are always wondering, and I still get asked, how many dogs do you have right now? Well, we have Shotzi, that's the old nasty red dog I told you about. And then Ted and Dharma, brother and sister. And Jack, our poodle. And then Nico and Pris and Buffy. So that's our pack. So what do these dogs have to do with the meaning of life? Because after all, that's the title of the sermon. Do we have anything meaningful to talk about? Well, first of all, when you have dogs, you do learn something about love. And people will argue that dogs don't love you. I'm not so sure about that. I think they do in their own way. And if you actually have dogs or cats or whatever pet you have, and they actually show affection back, you do learn something about love. You also learn about trust. When a little tiny animal will just spread out on your lap and know that it's safe, that's trust. That's comfort. They know they're safe. And that does something to us. Friendship. You get to see these dogs form bonds of friendship, amazingly enough. And even our nasty red dog, Shotzi, loves to play with our pup, Nico. And I didn't think she'd ever play with a dog again. And those two play together. It's amazing. And then there's that sense of community. Here's the old dogs herding the little pups around, wondering what's going on. You brought some more things home, Dad. Thanks a lot. But I have tons of photos of just swarms of dogs in the backyard having a good time and getting along. And this is my experiment with video. These are the 4 pups, 4 Pomeranians. And if you can sit in your backyard and watch this, it just makes you smile. See, you're laughing, you're going, oh, well, this is what makes my life happy, being able to watch this. And so they just tear into each other and run. And if you wonder if they're fighting, they are having a blast. And they did this a lot.
Tag team!
That was tiring. When we care for a pet, we are committing to another life. And if this is not a valuable use of our time, what is? And I think that's a profound thought out of all this. Anyone who takes a pet under their care is actually making a commitment to another life. And that is important. It doesn't have to be a human life for it to be important. And when we love a pet, we also accept that there is going to be a coming loss. Very few people adopt an animal thinking that animal is going to outlive them. They know when they take that animal in that at some point that animal will die and they will have to say goodbye. So we share their entire life, and we learn about the briefness of existence, that life is not permanent, that change is inevitable. So we go from the little pups on the left to poor Pedro on the right, who came to us already probably 16 years old or so. And back to Mahatma Gandhi, the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. And this is Faye. I thought this was a great photo to end it with, because again, that sermon I talked about is an animal's life. Would you make that trade for, well, you can have eternal life if you just send little Faye to hell for all eternity? Isn't that a fair trade? It's just an animal. Well, look at that face and tell me it's worth it. Then look at that face and say it's worth it to put them in puppy mills and treat them terribly so you can breed animals to make money. Or all the other horrible abuses that go on with these animals. They deserve the same respect and care that we would afford to people. And I believe that with the utmost conviction. So I thank you for joining me on this journey, and I look forward to our discussion, and you can share your stories of pets in your lives too. Thank you.